Today on episode 105 of Rail Talk, we recap all the fireworks at the September sale, look forward to a big Pennsylvania Derby day, and discuss the latest happenings in HISA versus the Horsemen. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. I don't know if you guys saw the Emmys, but I loved that little gimmick they had where Nate Bargatze put up the charity dollar counter, and every second that the award winners went over 45 seconds in their acceptance speech, he deducted $1,000 from the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. We need that for the Eclipse Awards, John. I have no shame in biting that idea from the Emmys, because God knows nothing has worked to this point to keep those Eclipse Awards acceptance speeches short.
Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable. Joe, the September sale was everything and then some, and it's still going on actually all the way through the end of this week. I know we have a lot to talk about with regard to all those topics that you mentioned, and I am looking forward to actually talking to you, my friend, because we had a week hiatus, and it pained me so.
Yes, same here. There was a hole in my heart that's now been filled. Let's start the show. The opinions expressed on Rail Talk are those of hosts Joe Bianca and Jon Green and do not reflect those of anybody we work with or work for. Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. In less than a week, we've got the California Fall Yearling Sale out in Pomona. West Point has found a couple of really nice horses out there. Definitely a good sale to shop for the West Coast and to find some really nice Calbreds by big-time sires. Not that there's anything wrong with the Calbred sires, but you can get Kentucky sires. We got a nice filly by Omaha Beach. We got one by Violence. We got one by Volatile. So you get some really nice Kentucky influence on the sire side, and then the quality of the Calbred program on the dam side. So that's in Pomona, September 23rd. Definitely go check it out. Look at the catalog online right now. The Mid-Atlantic Fall Yearlings catalog is online right now. That's September 30th in Timonium. Variety of yearlings from some really lucrative state-bred programs like Kentucky, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia. After that, we got the October digital sale, October 2nd through the 7th. Entries closed for that sale September 22nd. So get involved right now, as if you have horses that you think will be received well at the digital market, which is pretty much every horse at this point. October 14th, we get the Saratoga Fall Mix sale. That catalog was just released. Really nice sale for broodmares and weanlings, especially New York breds up at Saratoga. Then we got the Kentucky October yearlings. We'll be shopping that sale October 20th through the 23rd down in Lexington. And that all leads up to the marquee November sale, the Night of the Stars, November 3rd, 2 days after the Breeders' Cup. There's nowhere else you would rather be on that night than at Newtown Paddocks at Fasig-Tipton to see all those star mares and some of those weanlings sell. It's a very, very exciting time on the racetrack and an exciting time in the sales business as well. And you can go to Fasig-Tipton.com, check out all the action they have coming up. There's something for everybody. All right, so off the heels of a record-smashing Fasig-Tipton Saratoga sale, down at the Keeneland September sale this past week plus, and as John mentioned, it's still going on, but most of the major buyers have blown out of town by now. There were records dropping all over the place there too, and I think it goes back to something that John and Len were talking about when we were on the 100th show, which is the big, beautiful bill, which is an ugly-ass bill, except if you're a horse owner or an investor in this business, because that new bonus depreciation thing, I think, has been a game changer. And, we've seen it at West Point. We bought 30 horses last week. What pieces of 30 different horses so far at Keeneland September, which is awesome and exciting. But it's something that I don't think that we could have taken on a year ago even. Mm-hmm. And it's obviously it's good for the business to have people bidding big on horses. It's good for the breeders. It's good for the sellers. And it's overall a positive for the industry. But it was crazy competitive out there, and, especially as you would imagine in book one and book two. But I wasn't there. I'm home selling these shares of horses remotely. John was there on the ground at Keeneland this past week. So I'll toss it over to him. And what were your impressions, John?
Well, it's what you said, Joe. I mean, last year, and these numbers aren't exact, so don't hold me to it, but last year at the September sale, I think there were 24, 25 seven-figure yearlings. And after the third full day of sales, there were $41 million horses. So that in itself was, and again, a lot of the $1 million horses are always going to be in the first part of the sale, but they weren't even done with book two. And they already had over $41 million horses that had sold, and it wasn't like they were just a bit over 950,000. It was like, there was a lot of $1,300,000, $1,400,000, and $1,800,000. There were a couple of horses that sold for over $2 million. It was fireworks on a regular basis for those top horses. And if you notice in the results, just like in the Fasig summer sale, it was like millionaires partnering with millionaires in order to be able to afford these horses. And it was almost like building alliances to try to make sure that that you had enough money to be able to buy these horses, but also that you weren't going to run each other up, figuratively, I guess, in order to buy the horse that you wanted. And I'm sure, Joe, I don't know the answer to this, but like of those 30 horses, how many of them are just West Point? Probably not that many, right? They're all partnership horses.
Only a handful. Most of them were partnerships. Yeah.
Yeah. And even, and Julia, if you can pop this up, even the one that we bought in partnership with you guys, a really, really nice Constitution colt out of the mare Spare Cash, hip 519 for those of you that are scoring at home. That we paid a modest $775,000 for, which was the most expensive horse by far that we are part of. But the colt is now named Casino. Mm-hmm. And that was selected by our other partner. Not that we need to hobnob with famous people, but Alex Bregman's our partner on this, Joe, on Casino, and he was very excited. Knock it out of the park and beat them Yankees. So I'm very happy that we're having a chance to communicate on a regular basis with Alex Bregman. Sounds like just a really good dude, and is excited to be at this level in the business and be partners with us. But I digress, of course. But it was a trickle down effect. Not only that horses were selling for over seven figures, but then the next level of horses that normally would sell for like 300, 400,000, they were selling for $500,000 on a regular beat. And it permeated all the way through to as recently as yesterday, Joe, where you were still getting horses that were selling for over $250,000. And now we're talking like day 8, day 9 into the sale, and you're still popping at a really good clip. The other thing that I saw was that there were very few horses, percentage-wise, that were selling for like under $10,000. And mm-hmm. Why is that important? Well, it's important for two reasons. One is it shows, again, strength in the market all the way through. But the other thing that you and I always talk about is, what are these bottom level horses? Where are they going? Mm-hmm. And are they going to, to an unfortunate situation or not? And it looks like that the marketplace has done a much better job overall about making sure that there's a floor to keep these horses above a certain price, so that way they're not going to, they're going to be held out of harm's way. So I think overall, my takeaways were strength in numbers. The numbers were phenomenally strong all the way through the majority of the horses that were sold. If you can't beat them, join them. Partnerships were blooming all over the place. It was almost like the last day of college. People were hooking up and getting together all over here in Yar. And the other thing, Joe, and again, I appreciate that you didn't bring this up because you very well could have. How about Flightline and all of the yearlings that he sold, and at the price point that he sold? And it's not even so much the price point, because you can kind of monkey around with that a little bit. But I can tell you that we weren't looking for freshman sires, and there were a lot of Flightlines that were on our list and sold for beyond what we could do. So please, if you have more insight on that, because obviously you got the skinny on that horse.
Yeah, no, I mean, and just real quickly on what you mentioned about the lower end of the market. I mean, that's a big deal. It's easy to get wowed and starstruck by all of the big numbers you see thrown around. But I think that is something that the industry has to work towards, maybe having like a minimum sale mm-hmm. price for some of these horses. We saw what happened with the TTA sale like a couple of weeks ago, where a bunch of horses ended up with a suspected kill pen buyer, and thankfully they ended up back safely in the right hands. But that's something I think that we can't let fall through the cracks, especially at a sale with 4,000 horses. A lot of horses going for cheap money later in the sale. So I think that's something that's worth discussing and talking about. And we will expand on it, I think, going forward in future shows. But yeah, on the Flightline thing, listen, I'm biased, obviously, working for West Point, but I've never seen, aside from Justify and American Pharaoh, Triple Crown winners, I've never seen this kind of buzz for a freshman stallion. Like, I don't know what the results are now, but I think through the first two books, he was second only behind Gunrunner in the average for the sale, like, which is remarkable for a first crop stallion. And I think part of it is, yes, he had a phenomenal book of mares that he was bred to. So they almost all had pretty great pedigree pages, but they looked good too. Yeah. They looked awesome. And so far this year, West Point has put its money where its mouth is and bought 7 Flightlines, and they've all sold very, very quickly with the partners. Obviously, there is the cachet of the people who either were involved with Flightline or missed out on Flightline who want to get in on the babies. But yeah, that was something that, I expected those to sell well, but they sold even beyond my imagination, because at the end of the day, you are taking a chance. He's got no runners yet. He's not going to have any runners until next summer. We expect them to, kick ass on the racetrack. We don't know that for a fact yet. So I just thought that was really interesting. And I can't, other than a Triple Crown winner, I can't imagine another horse capturing and garnering this much attention for his first crop of yearlings anytime soon. So I thought that was really fascinating. 2 other stallions that I think just continue to kick ass at every single sale are Gunrunner and Not This Time. We bought pieces of 2 Not This Times, and they were both over $1 million. And they're nice horses for sure. But I think that like the traction of that stallion has just blown up so much. And shout out to the team at Tailor Made for, getting him and building him up to this point. And we've talked about it every weekend. It seems pretty much you see Not This Time horses winning by 10 lengths, winning stakes races left and right. And yeah, those to me are the big 3 coming out of this sale. Obviously Into Mischief is up there too, but I don't know. I think, Gunrunner and Not This Time particularly have, I think, reached that level. And I think Flightline, assuming his horses can run on the racetrack, is going to be on that level consistently very soon. That's what I noticed, John. There's no secret about any Not This Times anymore.
No, not this time. And Joe, I look back at the fact that we bought Chapman together, and I looked at his pedigree page, and at one of the nights I was there at down in Kentucky, I was like, what would that horse have sold for in the September sale?
Right.
With the way that the numbers were playing out and everything like that. I mean, not that he was inexpensive. We paid almost $400,000 for him, combined, with between the two of us. But
it looks like dirt cheap right now, dude.
Dirt cheap. I mean, it's not even the median right now with Not This Time. And I will, I'm gonna say this throughout the next year or so. The Flightlines have looked really good on the hoof, as they say. But I personally don't expect them to necessarily hit it out of the park early on as a 2-year-old season, because he himself wasn't a 2-year-old. I mean, so I want to be able to make sure that I pump the brakes. And even though these horses are really good looking and exciting prospects, I personally don't expect them to come into the Keeneland race meet in April and you're going to see 3 of them winning or anything like that. Like, I want to make sure that in my own mind, I give him the benefit of the doubt, because he wasn't that kind of like precocious 2-year-old. And you just don't want to put that kind of pressure on him. But when you're putting up that kind of money, you hope that they're going to be ready by the time the Saratoga sale comes around. Joe, we bought 18 horses, which was a lot for us at this September sale. And they ranged in price from $80,000 for a Vacoma filly all the way up to the Constitution that we bought together for $775. But for the most part, we tried to stay in our lane. And what really surprised me is normally we go down to the sale and, we go through our due diligence and have everyone give us short lists, and then we walk around with them and look at horses and the likes and go through our due diligence and process. But what surprised me is we actually bought more horses day 1, book 1 than we did day 2, book 2. That's how strong the sale was. The only reason why we got 3 horses on book 1, day 1 is because 2 of them were RNAs that we went back during the course of the sale and negotiated and bought, because I think people were like, okay, we have high expectations. And then when they got into the first 50 or 100 horses or so, they were like, well, we still have all of these really good horses on our list, and we still have all of these other horses, 3,000 horses to look at over the course of the week. So I'm not going to spend $200,000, $250,000 on a horse yet, because there may be other ones that are coming down the pike. And in retrospect, the two horses that we bought, that were RNAs that we bought for $250,000 a piece each, look like bargains compared to the rest of the week. So, you can't. I've learned that when you're down at a sale, you can't say, well, last year this is the way it played out, because each different sale and each different day of that respective sale is its own entity and its own organism, and they have new horses and they have new people involved. And this year, a slew of new buyers that were coming in to buy horses, and maybe the new buyers weren't quite ready, didn't feel comfortable, or didn't have their feet wet to understand the game enough to buy horses in book one. And they were like, okay, I'm going to sit back and kind of get a feel for the way this all is. So I think, we took advantage of it. Other people obviously took advantage of it, but the sale got stronger throughout that first week, which is really unusual.
Yeah. Well, and, what's interesting, and I don't know if you guys ever do this, but, there were a couple horses that were bred by a West Point partnership that we actually bought to race. There's a Flightline filly on day one out of Salty as Can Be. There was a Twirling Candy filly later in the sale, and just, a little inside baseball. So basically, when Flightline was first going to stud, we put together like a group of West Point investors to buy broodmares to breed to Flightline, and then to either sell the broodmares in foal or to sell the resulting foals. And some of them really rang the bell. We had a horse colt out of Exotic West that sold for over $1 million to the Japanese buyers. So, shout out to the people that were involved in that, and I always like that. And then, John, I'm sure that you've experienced this with certain RNAs or buybacks that you've had, that you've bred. I don't know, like it's a very distinct advantage to know these horses from day one, to know them throughout their full journey. And then as they turn to be yearlings, that we work very closely with Lane's End and have inside info on how these horses are growing up. So I thought that was really interesting. And those horses really sold quickly, because I think that's so huge, to know their development every step of the way. And I'm sure you guys have experienced that too. And so we're excited about those. But I wanted to ask you, John, kind of what you guys are looking for at the yearling sales, because the Constitution colt, I really, really like. Casino is his name now. And to me, and I'm not as experienced in this as you are, and I don't buy the horses, but to me, the balance you have to strike with a yearling is you want them to have a good size and good frame, but you don't want them to be too heavy where, you think they're going to be too bulky and too hard on themselves when they race. I think it's because there's a lot of projection involved. But so where do you find like that balance, John, between the horse, how you want them to look now and then projecting how you want them to look 6 months from now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that really is the art within the science, is trying to project. And there are certain trainers that have that ability. Mark Hasse is one of them, and where, he can project what a horse is going to fill in and look to be to the best of everyone's ability. I mean, obviously that, it's never a guarantee, but there are certain trainers that have that ability. And if you can find one, they're really worth their weight in gold. But Joe, our consultants, whether it's Kim Valerio or Lauren Carlisle, it's, when they look at horses, for the most part, when they're looking at horses at the sale, it's not the first time that they're looking at that horse. So, and I know Ingordo and his team do the same thing for you guys, where, they're going from farm to farm, basically like in August, and looking at all of the horses that are on that respective consignment's farm. And they're doing an all show. And that may be the first time that they see the horses in August. And then they're coming back and they're looking at them again in September. And they're looking at them multiple times, especially the first week of the sale, where the horses, are ship in and domicile there at the sales grounds almost for an entire week before they actually go through the ring. So they have a lot of time. It's almost like the Saratoga phasic sale, where they have a lot of time to nitpick and go over and really look at. And for our team, for Kim and Lauren, they're looking back at their notes from 4 or 6 weeks earlier, because at that point in time in a horse's life, they're developing and growing a lot. I mean, the horse is then, 16 months, 18 months old at that point, and the development is really starting to ascend. So I think that's part of it. You have to have people that are willing to look at horses, project where they were, from the time they see them the first time in the summer project to where they are and then to continue to do so. And Joe, what I think a lot of people miss, and it's really because of experience, but what a lot of people don't understand is they're looking at a horse as a snapshot the way it is right now. But if you don't know the family lines, if you don't know what to expect, then you're really missing a big part of the equation. And Jeff Hazlett at Tailor Made told me, has a great line that he told me a couple of years ago that really struck me, resonated with me. And that is, when you breed a potato to a potato, you're going to get a potato. Okay. And so what does that mean? Because John, we're in livestock. We're not in vegetables here, for God's sake. If you breed a horse from a stallion with shorter legs, for example, or not as much stretch, like a Speightstown, for example, or a Vekoma, and you see a stockier horse in front of you as a yearling, well, that's not a negative. That's actually what genetics should be doing. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people would look at it and say, it doesn't have enough length to me, or doesn't have enough leg for me. And that's probably true on the average. When you're looking at gun runners, or you're looking at Flightlines, or you're looking at medallions that are big, leggy kind of horses, then it would look smaller in comparison. So they would cross the horse off their list. Well, if you look, that's why we've had so much success with like Vekoma, and so much success with Constitution, and so much success with other certain stallions that we seem to find that other people don't do as well with. And it works the opposite way. Like Mackenzie is a really good stallion. We've bought 6 or 7 Mackenzies over the course of his first 3 or 4 crops that have raced. And I can't buy one that's faster than me, let alone get black type. But he's a good stallion, and there's a lot of people that do really well. We just haven't figured out exactly what the right kind of Mackenzie looks like yet. And we're learning like anybody else. But I think that's part of it, is that you have to look at a snapshot of where the horse is now, project what it's going to be, and then also be realistic and say, hey, if this family line throws certain attributes and you're seeing those attributes, you can't fault a horse for that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There's so many factors. I mean, you got to look at like the birth date too, especially with yearlings. Like a April fall is going to look way different than January or February fall. I don't know. It's a really fascinating puzzle. Obviously, a lot of projection involved. It's a little bit more boom or bust, I think, than the 2-year-old sales. But yeah, it's super interesting, and I'm glad for the industry that the big dollars have been coming in, and we need that to trickle down throughout the business, to me first, and then to everybody else across the industry, so we can improve the health of the business. But it was good to see those results this past week, and also at FASIC during the summer. Rail Talk is sponsored by Tailor Made. Super busy time of the year for Tailor Made. And, I haven't looked at the stats recently, but at least from book 1, they were the leading consignor by a good margin. And you heard us talk about it all year, about how they are the place to go, especially for the yearling sales. And they didn't disappoint, brought an absolutely star-studded consignment to the sale, but they're still selling. Even in these late books, they got horses who are at the lower end of the market, who they can help find you your best possible result for. So they do it all. Obviously not this time success we mentioned as well. And just, it's incredible to watch him just so quickly. I felt like in the last couple of years has just exploded to that upper echelon, that like top 3 class of sires. They were expensive. They were good looking at the sale. So shout out to the Tailor Made Stallions team as well for all they've done to build him up into one of the elite sires in the entire world. And he just keeps getting better and better. So go to tailormadefarm.com. They also have partnerships. They also do boarding. There's pretty much everything that you could imagine under one roof in this business, and they're second to none in terms of their customer service and the way they treat their clients. So I know they're still hard at work at the Keeneland sale, but hat tip to the team at Tailor Made for all the success so far down in Lexington, and looking forward to seeing the other yearlings that you guys have to sell in the upcoming FASIC Tipton October sale. And of course, all of the explosive success of Not This Time in the Stallion roster on the racetrack. So this Saturday, the eyes of the racing world look upon Bensalem, Pennsylvania, and Parx Casino and Racetrack as the Pennsylvania Derby, the 15-race Pennsylvania Derby card will be conducted with two $1 million grade ones, the Pennsylvania Derby for 3-year-olds and the Cotillion for the 3-year-old fillies. Post time for the Pennsylvania Derby is 6 o'clock on the dot. That's nice. That's easy to remember. Listen, you don't have journalism, you don't have sovereignty, but to me, you got a really nice group of 3-year-olds outside of those two. I don't know who else you would really want in this race. And this is coming from someone who is pissed off about how the Pennsylvania Derby has started to cannibalize the Travers. Mm-hmm. You got to call a spade a spade. This is a really nice field. Baeza is the 2-1 morning line favorite, but very close behind him on the morning line is goal oriented at 5-2. You got Gosker, who was the runner up in the Haskell and the Preakness. Interesting new shooters like Magnitude. Obviously, he didn't run that great in the Travers, but he's capable of a brilliant race. David of Athens, I think, is interesting. Nice lightly raced horse for Brendan Walsh. Big truck. I mean, there's some really fascinating horses in here that, yes, are not going to be a part of the championship discussion because sovereignty has exploded away and journalism exploded away from everybody else. But this is a really fascinating race to me, John.
Well, and again, you can't look at horse racing Twitter and come to any kind of a positive consensus. Okay, we'll leave it at that. But some of the ire that is on there right now is like, hey, there's no grade one winner. That's my voice for horse racing Twitter.
Yes,
there's no grade one winner in the Pennsylvania Derby. What a piece of shit race it is. Well, nay, I say.
Listen, just real quick. The two horses won all the grade ones this year.
Well, I was just going to say, if there's no journalism, there's no sovereignty. If you take them out, you have five different horses of the 10, Joe, that were grade one placed. Okay. So if you take out, the top two horses out of the division, these horses probably would have filled in and hit the wire first in those grade ones. But even so, they're still hitting the wire. They're still in the trifecta and they're still getting black type and grade one placing. And Baeza lost by a length in the Jim Dandy to Sovereignty. And Gosker lost by a half a length to Journalism in the Haskell. And Magnitude, was grade one placed in the Travers, albeit he lost by 20 lengths. But there's five horses in here that are grade one placed. So it's unfair to me to say that the Pennsylvania Derby, this year, is anything but a grade one. Yeah, we'd all like to see one of the big two in there, but you take out like Happy Delusional, who really I don't think should be in the race.
The two certainly should not be in the race.
And Altabelli, who was a $15,000 claimer in the race, and you have 7 or 8 legitimate horses in the race. So Sandy on the rail, I think, is an improving horse. If you cross out his one turf race, he's literally improved every single race from the time he started at Ellis Park.
That was one of my worst beats of the meet at Saratoga when he lost the Curlin by a head like that. And he was in front of Chancellor McPatrick, and then they bumped a couple of times, and then he lost the Bob at fucking 13-1. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so he's an improving horse. You got Magnitude. You have David of Athens, who look, I don't know if the horse belongs to be in here or not, but certainly won very impressively last time out at Ellis, and is a Nyquist. So that he's got the opportunity to jump up and do well. Goal oriented, is lightly raced, but really other than the Preakness has danced every dance that he's been in. Baeza, you mentioned, who. Short just by the fact that he was born into the wrong crop. If he was a different, born in a different group, he may be, the horse that we talk about for 3-year-old champ. Gosker, who ran second in the Haskell and the Preakness, and then Moplex, who, is interesting to me just in the sense that the horse has got speed, and on the Parx racetrack, that's what you really need. So to me, it's actually a really solid group, especially when you compare it to some of the 4 or 5 horse fields that post Triple Crown racing has garnered and benefited from after the Triple Crown. I know that last part didn't make sense, but forgive me because I'm already on to the next race, which is the $1 million Cotillion. Joe, when was the last time you remember a 3-year-old filly race being the exact same purse as its male counterpart?
Probably last year at Parx when they did the same
exactly.
thing.
That's exactly my point. I mean, to have $1 million race for the girls is great. Yeah. And again, 4 of the horses in here have tremendous speed. I personally think that this is a little bit different than the PA Derby because I think Lucara and Good Cheer stand out in my mind to the rest of this field. Of course, what would a Parx or Mid-Atlantic graded stake race be without a a horse owned and trained by Uriah St. Louis. God bless him. He just tries every single time. And you know what? His horses hit the board more times than I want to admit. I mean, he takes shots, when he can. But, to me, those two horses really stand out. But, Joe, there's a lot of speed in here, and I don't know if that's good for Lucara at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, honestly, I think both races have a lot of speed. I was going to say about the PA Derby, I think it really sets up for Baeza. I mean, you got Magnitude. David of Athens is pretty quick, goal-oriented, has speed. Gosger, Moplex. I mean, they all got to be close. So I think Baeza is the horse to beat. But I if you are trying to get a price in there, I think Big Truz and So Sandy are both interesting. So Sandy should save ground on the rail with Kendrick, and Big Truz has got a lot of talent, and I think they're just trying to find the right distance for him. So those two I would be interested in beyond just Baeza. But yeah, I agree with you on the Cotillion as well. I mean, I'm not a huge Lucara fan. I just think she's a nice horse, but I think the big wins that she's had, she's gotten loose on a speed favoring racetrack. Mm-hmm. And, I think that there was really no excuse in the Alabama, other than maybe she didn't want to go a mile and a quarter. She got everything her own way and just had nothing when the real running started. So certainly a nice filly, but I don't think that she is as good as her resume looks on paper. I'm interested to see what Scottish Lassie does. She's the 9-5 morning line favorite. She's kind of a boomer bust horse. She won the Coaching Club American Oaks by 15 lengths. The last time you saw a horse win a grade 1 at Saratoga by 15 lengths. And, she skipped the Alabama, which I was, curious about. To point to this race, maybe they think she doesn't want to go that far, but she drew the rail, so Rosario is going to have to kind of navigate whether he wants to send and go to the front and try to take back and go around horses. So there's going to be a little bit of a decision point early on in the race for her. I think, to me, this is the race that Good Cheer has to win if she's still one of the elite 3-year-old fillies, because, she had every chance to go get Nitrogen in the Alabama and couldn't do it. And Nitrogen obviously ran very well, but I thought Good Cheer just ran fine in that race. She ran poorly, obviously, in the Acorn before that. To me, with all the speed in this race, as you mentioned, this race is going to set up on a silver platter for her. Mm-hmm. And it's time to see whether she's still that filly. And it's going to make a big difference in the championship race, obviously. This is, other than the distaff, I think this is the most important race thus far for the 3-year-old filly championship, because you got a lot of horses who can make an argument. Good Cheer obviously won the Oaks and was undefeated before that, but has kind of fallen off a little bit. Scottish Lassie, as I mentioned, at the 15-length win in the grade 1, not quite accomplished as the other ones yet, but another grade 1 win here could launch her there. Lucara, like we said, multiple grade 1 winner. So I think there's a couple of different horses who can make a statement towards getting that Eclipse Award later this year or early next year. I think Clico is a little interesting. Similar to David of Athens in the PA Derby. This is a Brennan Walsh horse who's lightly raced. Brennan Walsh horses, I think, typically get better as they race more. She's a horse that's got a little bit of tactical speed that can be close enough if the pace doesn't materialize. I mean, Indy Bay, who's stretching out, has got to make this a quick pace. So I think Clico's a little bit interesting for the Avengers. Oh, they're X-Men racing now. I see X-Men racing. They actually named themselves after superheroes officially. All right, cool. So yeah, I think she's super interesting and talented. But I think to me, the story of the race is Good Cheer is still the same horse that she was through the Kentucky Oaks.
Yeah, and you mentioned Good Cheer. This is a make it or break it race for her, as silly as it sounds, because she needs to bounce off of a couple of what I would say lackluster in comparison to her previous races. Joe, the thing that's interesting to me also is you got Scottish Lassie on the rail, Lucara right next to her. Both those horses have the same kind of racing style, where they try to get in front and improve from there. The thing that concerns me about both of them is, for the most part, you look at their races, neither one of them ever passes horses. So wherever they break and they are kind of at the half-mile pole, that's usually where they finish, which, concerns me. You mentioned the Safi Joseph horse, Indy Bay, that is coming from a 7/8 race, albeit I think it was a 7/8 race at Churchill, which is like, what, a 9-turn race at Churchill? I mean, not Churchill, like at Charlestown. Charlestown, yeah, I think it's like 9 turns. It's a lot of lefts. So she's already graduated to run at least 2 turns, which this race is at the Cotillion. But there's a lot of speed in here, and I think as you mentioned, it sets up really perfectly for good cheer. And also, I think maybe for the outside horse for Dry Powder, which is a Chad Summers horse, a gun runner they paid over $500,000 for, that won the prep for this race.
She was impressive too.
Very impressively. And ran a lifetime best number, and you wonder at that point, is she going to be able to break through and continue to move up the ranks, or is she going to bounce? Because the last time she ran a lifetime best, you can say, she ran third in the Oaks at Saratoga. You can say, well, that wasn't really a bounce. Well, it was, because she lost by 21 lengths.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating card. Like, I joked about, Parx in the open of this segment that, a lot of times people think of it as a casino that happens to have a racetrack attached. This is probably one of the few cards they're going to have where they handle close to what they actually pay out in purses. But it is worth paying attention to, in addition to the Cotillion and the Pennsylvania Derby, which are really fascinating grade ones. You have the grade 2 Gallant Bob for 3-year-olds sprinting 6 furlongs. It's a great $400,000 grade 2. You get the Parx Dirt Mile, you get the Greenwood Cup. So it's a really, really nice day of racing. So we're looking forward to it. And I think, honestly, we're going to have, at least on the Philly side, we're going to have a lot more clarity about the championship discussion after Saturday's races. Rail Talk is sponsored by Epic Insurance Brokers, one of the nation's top retail insurance brokers, providing expertise across key lines of insurance like property and casualty, employee benefits, and unique specialty insurance. Our buddy, our homie, our guy, Chris Moore, leads Epic's equine specialty practice. You see him all over the place at the sales, at the races. He has horses himself. He lives and breathes this game. That's who you want looking after your assets in this business, someone who knows the industry inside and out. Yearling season is here. This is equine insurance renewal season. If you buy yearlings and your insurance policy doesn't renew between July 1st and October 31st, you're leaving money on the table. Don't do that. Call Chris, shoot him a text at 317-650-4519. Start the conversation like our buddy Len Green. He guarantees he'll find you value. If not, he'll donate to an aftercare organization of your choosing in your honor. But I'm very confident Chris and the rest of the great team at Epic will help you out and help organize what can be a very messy insurance situation, especially if you got a lot of different horses. All right, that leads us to this week's
Epic Performance of the Week.
This week's Epic Performance of the Week is Bentornato in the Thoroughbred Society Stakes over the weekend at Churchill Downs. Bentornato is welcome back in Italian. That's very fitting, first of all, for us, because we were off last week. Welcome back to me and John. And also, Bentornato hadn't run in a really long time. He hadn't run since he ran his second to Straight No Chaser in the Breeders' Cup Sprint last year. So this was his big comeback race, and he blew him away. Got a 108 buyer, stopped the clock in 108.2. Skelly was in the race, very fast horse for Steve Asmussen, and he ran by Skelly like he was standing still. So this is a very, very interesting horse leading up to the sprint, because there hasn't been a standout sprinter to me thus far. Bookham Dano has been very good, but he's not, you know what I mean? He wasn't crazy impressive in the forego. He doesn't lay over the field in the sprint, and we don't even know if he's going to the sprint to begin with. So this is a wide open looking race, and this is a horse that might even be better second time off the layoff. And he ran great last year in the sprint, ran second at 25-1. This was a very, very impressive performance by a Florida bred son of Valiant Minister. Those horses are usually pretty quick. There's not a ton of them, but they're usually pretty fast and very sprinty. So he's a really, really interesting horse for the Breeders' Cup. He's not going to be a secret now, obviously, that he had this huge race on his resume, but that was crazy impressive. And there were some good performances over the weekend. Charlie Appleby's horse in the Woodbine Mile was really good. John mentioned a couple of 2-year-olds, but to me, Bentornato took the cake as the epic performance of the week. Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. They're the king of the hill for one reason: no other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Len and DJ Stable have over 200 horses. You heard about the ones they just bought at Keeneland September. They won over 2,600 races. They've got close to 1,000 clients in the horse business because they make them money and save them taxes. Why do I always say Texas? Taxes, Joe. Taxes. Anyway, as always, Len offers a complimentary, confidential half-hour consultation. No problem getting that out with all those C's and all those consonants and all those syllables. He guarantees he'll find you value if you call him up. And what's that number? Michael Agresta.
732-634-5100.
into the sweet sounds of Michael Agresta's Green Group jingle. Appreciate that as always. Or go to greenco.com and do it soon. If you file an extension, you got less than a month to get that extension filed for 2024's taxes, or you can get a jump on your 2025 taxes by hitting up Len and the Green Group. They've helped out so many people across the industry, and this is a time, especially with the new tax bill being passed, there's a lot of vagaries and different nuances that you need to know, and nobody knows them better than Len and the Green Group. But you don't have to take it from me. Take it from another satisfied customer, Bill Betts, who actually, John, you said, rang the bell at Keeneland.
Yeah, with his homebreds, he sold horses for $600,000, $425,000, and $310,000 respectively. Joe, Bianca. Bill is a boutique breeder and owner, and knows what he's doing. He was also the co-breeder on El Barrio.
Nice. And you said they were in book 4 too, which is a pretty big accomplishment to reach those numbers in book 4. So shout out to Bill, another satisfied customer of the Green Group. Let him tell you about how he was helped out by Len and his team.
I used to have an accountant here in Lexington, and he retired. And I'd heard about Len and his involvement in the horses, and somehow we got together and talked and hit it off. And we've been partners on a lot of mares and a lot of activities in addition to his work, doing his work as our accountant. His knowledge of this specific industry is, it's unique, and it has situations in it that if you don't have experience, it's hard for you to understand. And Len's been in it for so long, and it's just seen all sides of it that he brings an expertise to this that you just can't find with most people.
Thank you, Bill. Congrats on the Keeneland success. Call Len up at 732-634-5100 to go to greenco.com. You will not be disappointed. They are the best in the business when it comes to finding you tax benefits and savings. All right, so we're going to do our little kind of news roundup PTI style session here, just to go through a couple of stories pretty quickly. This was interesting to me. A bunch of horsemen's groups like the THA and Toba and NITHA and all these horsemen's groups wrote a letter to the FTC yesterday, released it yesterday, quote, to express their deep concern with the proposed HISA 2026 budget. Now, the HISA budget in 2025 was approximately $81 million, according to the letter. The 2026 proposed budget only provides a year-over-year decrease of under 4% to $78 million. Quote, the industry has no recourse other than to oppose the proposed budget due to concerns as to its impact on the health of the industry and to recommend that HISA re-examine its budget with the goal of at least a 30% reduction. Now, this is a lightning rod issue. Mike Rapoli came on and yelled at me about it on the 100th episode. And he's basically was like, could we do what HISA does for $40 million? And my answer was, I don't know. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have Lisa Lazarus on the show next week to kind of go over the budget in greater detail. But I kind of want to open it up to John as someone who pays these bills. West Point obviously pays some of the HISA fees as well, but I don't personally do it. John does as the general manager of a stable. John, what's your impression of HISA and, how expensive it is and whether or not we can be more efficient?
Well, I think that there's two different things at play here. Okay. Number one is I think any business, any organization should always look at their own budgets for efficiencies and inefficiencies. And I'm sure that when we talk to Lisa next week, she'll get into the weeds with us as far as what things can and can't be addressed. And look, she's looking at it as, she's running in essence a business also, albeit, not for profit, but still, she still has to come in within certain guidelines in order to get the funding for the following year. So that's first and foremost. The other is, I look at it, Joe, as an owner who is racing horses in what I would say the new world now, which is for the most part, I think that whether the HISA testing itself has actually caught people who are pushing the envelope, or the way that things are set up right now with the number of days that you have before you can use certain medications or procedures, or that it's just a big prophylactic effect and it's scaring people into, kind of towing the line and not pushing the envelope anymore. Whatever it is, I'm not seeing on the eye test as many horses in races where you go, there's no way that should have happened, or there's no way that this improvement should have occurred, going from one barn to the next. I'm just not seeing that as much. Are we getting the high profile, cheaters in essence? I don't think necessarily that the trainers that I thought were taking advantage of medication rules are the ones that are, in the crosshairs right now, or the ones that have been, found guilty through drug testing. And that may be coming down the pike, on the investigative side. But I think overall, if you say, is HISA doing the job that we need to make things more fair? Absolutely. Now, there's a cost to that. I don't know if the cost should be 20 million, 40 million, 80 million, or anywhere in between. But I can see it that races are more fairly run, and that when you run a horse in a race, you're not going down the past performances or the overnight and going, oh shit, so-and-so has a horse in this race, I'm screwed. And I think that's really, to me, as a horse owner, that was the main part of what I was hoping for, is just to make things on an even playing field. And if my horse isn't as good as your horse, then so be it. But I don't want my horse to be running against a chemically enhanced horse where we don't have a chance, even if we're on our best day. So I think our conversation with Lisa next week is going to kind of flesh out some of the finances of it. But if you say to me, is HISA working in the sense that is it making races, more fair? I think absolutely.
Yeah, well, and it's that's something that people say. It's like, who have they caught? Who have they caught? You look me in the eye as a regular horseman and tell me that you don't feel like you're on a more level playing field now, that you don't see the re-breaks, that you still see the re-breaks that you used to see. You don't.
Right.
You don't. You don't see the horses going 44, 108, and then getting headed in the stretch and coming back and winning by open lengths. You just don't see it. So like you said, I think it's a deterrent effect, if nothing else. So I completely reject the argument that things haven't gotten better from a level playing field, from a fairness standpoint, or from a safety standpoint. So I completely reject that. The different argument is, how efficient can we be? How efficient are we being, and how efficient can we be? And that's a legitimate argument that I'm not privy to the budget, that I can't answer. So I'm looking forward to having Lisa on. But there might be a fair point that, there's certain bloat in the budget, of any major organization. It happens sometimes. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation and seeing, maybe where we can do better. The other thing I want to say is, part of those expenses have got to be fighting these frivolous fucking lawsuits that have been brought against them, and the nonstop HPPA back and forth in all the courts. That has to be at least part of the budget. All of those lawyer fees, they're not paying those. Lisa and the team are not paying those out of their own pockets. So I think you got to look inward in that way. Like, if you're a horsemen's organization, if you're an association that represents horsemen, tell everybody to stop suing, and then maybe you would have a little bit of savings, because it's just, and we know it's not going anywhere. Like, how many times will the different judges strike it down or kick it to a lower court before you realize that this is the law of the land, at least for now, and we got to work together and make it as good as as efficient as possible. Like, to me, that's one of the things they don't mention in the letter, obviously, is all of the litigation that HISA has had to go through with the kicking and screaming of some of the horsemen's associations that refuse to accept it as the law of the land. So once you tell those guys to go away and those lawsuits to go away, then I think you have more of a leg to stand on to bitch about the budget being too high. So I'm looking forward to having Lisa on next week, and we'll try to get to the bottom of it, because I'm not objecting to the fact that there could be more efficiency in the budget, but we're going to see. We're going to talk to her.
And Joe, can I just jump for a quick second? So since we are teasing this up and we are going to have Lisa Lazarus on our show next week, if you have questions for her or for the organization that you want us to ask, please send it to us in advance.
Write it in the comments or DM us.
We're very accessible, and we want to have these questions so we can have an in-depth conversation. We don't get Lisa on the show that often. She doesn't do very many interviews on a show like this. So it's an opportunity for, you have a bitch, you have a complaint, you have a concern, or you have a question, send it to us so that way we can voice it on the show. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, again, I'm sympathetic to the idea that it's too expensive. But yeah, we'll talk about it. And if you have specific questions, let us know and we'll ask them to her. All right. One other thing I wanted to touch on real quick. Monmouth Park's meet wrapped up recently, and I'm reading from Matt Haggerty's article in the DRF. It says total handle at the recently concluded Monmouth Park meet fell 16.1% as the track struggled to fill races during a crowded summer calendar. Total handle dropped $44.2 million from $212.7 million handled during a 50-day meet last year to $178.5 million during a 49-day meet this year. Despite racing only one fewer day, Monmouth carded 34 fewer races this year, and average handle per race dropped 9.7%. Field size was also down. Field size was 7.52 per race last year, 7.04 this year. That's a major drop to lose half a horse per race year over year. 2 years ago, it was even higher. It was 7.71 horses per race. And I'm worried about Monmouth Park. We talked about Monmouth earlier this summer and how special it is to us, especially John, during Haskell week. And if you look at the attendance, they're averaging still like 6,500 people a day. They got like 15,000 people on Mother's Day. They had 41,000 people on Haskell Day. So they're clearly doing something right in terms of bringing people to the track. But they own the regular horse players who aren't there just on Haskell Day are not going to keep betting races that only have 6 or 7 horses in it all day long. And to me, this goes back to, again, and I'm a broken record on this, and I'm not the only one, is how unnecessarily crowded the Mid-Atlantic racing schedule is. And I just have to keep beating this dead horse that why can't people get in a room and figure out how to work it best for every track, for Laurel, for Delaware, for Monmouth, for Colonial, to all those tracks in the area. Why can't we have one unified racing calendar that benefits all of these tracks? Why are they all running on top of each other in the summer? It makes no sense. You're competing for the same horses. It's not good for anybody. The product at Delaware sucks. The product at Laurel is mildly better, but it's not great. And product at Colonial, if they didn't have that turf course, would be terrible too. Right. Yeah, it really frustrates me. Obviously I come at it from a Monmouth-centric standpoint because I think Monmouth is one of the top 5 tracks in America to visit. And they're in a tough spot because, they do get kind of subsidies from the state government, but they don't get direct casino subsidies, which a lot of other racetracks have and that survive on. I don't know. I'm very, very, very worried about the future at Monmouth Park. When 16% year over year, that is a major, major loss in handle. And it sucks for me because I look at this as a very, very fixable problem. And as is typical of racing so many times, people cannot unify, can't get in a room and figure some shit out to help all of these tracks stay in business. All right, now that I got that off of my chest, there was a big weekend of racing that we wanted to touch on this past weekend. I think it was called Turf Champions Day, I think is what they're calling it now, at Woodbine with the Woodbine Mile and the grade ones for 2-year-olds. John, I know you were tuned into that. Tell us about some of the highlights.
Yeah, what was great is that Woodbine has this day where they have for the juvenile turf horses, they have the Summer and the Talma respectively, both grade ones, both win and you're ins. And you get international flavor, not just from Canada, but you also get some horses that ship in from overseas. Charlie Appleby has been famous about doing that and successful about doing that the past few years, especially where they use the Summer and the Talma kind of as a springboard. They run there, they hit the board and they stay in North America, and then ultimately go to the Breeders' Cup 7 weeks later. And they've had, wild success in doing it that way. Joe, the reason why I'm bringing it up is, of course, because it's all about me. We had Hot Mash, who was not a DJ horse, but was a Jon Green horse. I have 25% of that with some of my friends, Dr. Lubucki and Will and his son, and trained by none other than John Service, who trained Jaywalk for us all those years ago. And
does Len know you're moonlighting?
I'm moonlighting. I actually, it was on my own. And you know what, Joe? I know you're going to be surprised to hear this, but guess who Hot Mash is by. That's right. Not this time. So not, she ran an 80 by her first time out at Ellis. Almost broke the track record. That's how fast she was going. We gave her 6 weeks, brought her to the Natalma. She was in front with midway down the stretch, and just put in a phenomenal race. Ran second in the Natalma, and now has punched her ticket to hopefully run in the juvenile turf fillies race out in California. And then, oh, by the way, there was also the summer stake that was won by a Nyquist.
Yeah, well, did you, this was a private purchase? You bought into this horse after the debut?
So Kim Valerio actually, pointed the horse out to us last year. I think it was like a book 3 or book 4 horse. And at that point in time, DJ Stable was done buying. And I've known these guys, Lou and Will and that group for a number of years. They're really, really good people. And I keep in very close communication with John Service. John's trained for us off and on for a number of years. And, we just have a great connection with the Service family. And basically, Kim suggested that we buy a piece of it, and Michelle and I actually bought 25% of the horse. And like I said, she won very impressively first time out. Now ran second in a Grade 1, and she is Hot Mash is a half to a Grade 1 Ashland winner. So she has kind of a deep family. So yeah. We're very excited about that. Horsepower of ours ran second in an undercard race. Joe Orsino actually flew up there just to watch Horsepower run second in a 7/8 race. And then, Joe, we also had El Barrio, who's a homebred of ours, an elusive quality filly that won impressively on the undercard and is going to run in the Miss Grillo, which is also a win in your end. So, I know this segment is supposed to be about general racing, but, it always turns out to be about you and me.
All roads lead back to Jon Green eventually. And no, that's exciting. And maybe I'll see you on the Aqueduct for the Miss Grillo. It's a big day. Although that's the same day as the Breeders' Futurity, right? Well, I was going to say the other piece of news is Ewing had his last major breeze for the Breeders' Futurity today. He got to Churchill over the weekend. So that's exciting. On the West Point front, we're going to have Ewing in the Breeders' Futurity and Curtain Call in the Champagne that same day. So lots of great action. Can't wait for that big day of racing, the last big Breeders' Cup prep day, with plenty of great 2-year-olds running across the country. So yeah, we're building up to the BC, my friend.
It is right around the corner. I mean, now we're down to under 60 days, which is really exciting. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you start to see some of these preps really come into play. Opening weekend at Keeneland is always historically just a phenomenal race weekend, and so many of those winners go on to run in the Breeders' Cup. So we'll actually be down there because our filly Nitrogen is running that weekend in the Spinster. And I did talk to McPeak. I bumped into him at the sale, and I tried my best to convince him about just how beautiful Delaware Park is this time of year. But he was steadfast, and he said, nope, we're gonna run Torpedo Anna in the Spinster against you. And then he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, but don't worry, because I think once we announce that Torpedo is going to run in the Spinster and with you guys in the Spinster, nobody else is going to run against us. It's just going to be a match race.
Good old-fashioned match race. So looking forward to that. Yeah, a lot to be decided leading up to the Breeders' Cup, including whether or not I'm going to have any money left to bet the Breeders' Cup, because it's been a rough year at the windows for me, just laying it out there. But yeah, no, this is the best time of year, that ramp up to the championship. It's Friday and Saturday. Can't wait to be out there at Del Mar. All right, so that's going to do it for episode 105 of Rail Talk. Good to be back with my co-pilot, Jon Green. Thank you to our producer, Patty Wolf, our associate producers, Julia Cresta and Nathan Wilkinson. Don't forget, next week, we've got Lisa Lazarus on the show. So if you have questions for her, particularly about the HISA budget, put them in the comments of the YouTube video, DM us on Twitter, Instagram. There's plenty of ways to find us, and we will get your questions answered by Lisa. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe. Smash that button on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible. Join the Rail Talk family. We'll love you forever for it. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next week back here on Rail Talk.